Back in 8th grade, my dad indulged himself by buying his dream car. I was too young to drive at the time, so I don't remember the specifics, but he got a silver convertible Porsche 911 with chrome and glass accents. It was a stunning machine with plenty of power under the hood. The first year he owned it, he decided we should take a road trip together. It was a way to celebrate, bond, and break in the new ride. He even promised to give me some driving lessons. So when school let out that summer, we packed up and hit the road for about a week. The 911 is a small car, so we couldn't fit much in the way of clothes and supplies, but it was a blast. We had a loose plan to head north, then west, before driving down the coastal highway through California. We jammed to music, talked about life, shared stories, and told riddles and jokes. We saw beautiful landscapes, mostly canyons and valleys in the Southwest and Pacific Northwest. It was an incredible experience. We indulged in gas station snacks, and when we stayed at nicer hotels, we'd eat at nice restaurants. The mix of high and low was perfect for both of us. One night, we arrived in a mid-sized town. After checking into a nice hotel, we hit the pool and wandered downtown. My dad joked about the attractiveness of the local women, which we both found amusing. After a nice dinner and some exploring, we headed back to our hotel room. As we approached, I noticed a small crowd around some cars, which made me uneasy, but my dad didn't seem bothered. We settled in, watched TV, and ate Reese's Pieces, my dad's favorite. As the night went on, I could hear voices outside getting louder. My dad, a former Marine with a tough reputation, wasn't fazed. He told me to ignore it and try to sleep, but I was too anxious. Eventually, the voices turned into shouting. My dad, now awake, peeked through the blinds and decided to check it out. He grabbed his gun from under his pillow, told me to stay put, and went outside. From the window, I watched as he approached the group. He spoke to them calmly but firmly, showing them his gun. They quickly dispersed, and he returned to the room, reassuring me everything was fine. I finally managed to fall asleep. Sometime later, I was jolted awake by pounding on the door. I remembered my dad's warning not to open the door for anyone. He was already up, keeping a close eye on the situation. The person outside was begging for help, claiming they were in danger. My dad asked why, and the man explained he was trying to protect his work truck from a group of drunks who had attacked him. My dad opened the door just enough to speak to him while holding his gun. The situation escalated as the crowd closed in. My dad told me to call 911, and I pretended to dial. The police arrived shortly after, dispersing the group and taking statements. The man at our door explained that he had been attacked while trying to protect his truck. The police handled the situation, and we didn't have to give a statement. The next morning, we saw his truck still in the parking lot as we left. This happened about 6 years ago. I was on a solo road trip to California with my black Mustang. I had just bought it about a month earlier. I was driving down a quiet highway just past the Arizona border, with the sun setting in the distance. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Little did I know, my peaceful journey was about to take a dark turn. As I drove, I noticed a car ahead of me swerving slightly. At first, I thought the driver might be drunk, but then I saw it, a figure darting across the road. The impact sent the something tumbling onto the pavement, lifeless. My heart pounded in my chest as I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a stop. Oh my God, I thought as the realization pierced me. That was a person. The car that had hit the pedestrian didn't slow down. Instead, it sped up, racing away from the scene. Shock turned to anger as I watched the taillights disappear into the distance. I couldn't just leave the person lying there. I grabbed my phone and rushed out of the car, dialing 911 as I ran to the crumpled figure on the road. As I got closer, I realized it was a young woman, her body twisted unnaturally, blood pooling around her. She wasn't moving. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice crackled through the phone. There's been an accident, I said, my voice shaking. A car hit a pedestrian and drove off. We're on Highway 42, about 10 miles from the nearest town. Please send help. Stay with the victim and keep her safe. Help is on the way, the operator instructed. I looked down at the woman, knowing there was nothing more I could do for her. My thoughts turned to the driver who had fled. They needed to be held accountable. Without thinking, I got back into my car and started driving, determined to find the hit-and-run driver. The road was dark now, the sun completely gone. I pushed the accelerator, my eyes scanning for any sign of the car. My heart raced as I spotted taillights in the distance. I followed them, the anger and adrenaline driving me forward. The car turned off the highway onto a narrow, winding road. I stayed close, careful not to get too near. The road grew darker and more desolate, trees closing in on both sides. I kept following, my headlights cutting through the night. After what felt like an eternity, the car pulled into a run-down motel parking lot. I parked a distance away, watching as the driver got out. It was a man, tall and lean, his movements hurried and anxious. He glanced around nervously before heading into one of the motel rooms. I waited a few minutes, my mind racing with what to do next. I couldn't let him get away, but confronting him alone might be dangerous. I dialed 911 again, explaining the situation to the operator and giving them the location. Stay in your car and keep an eye on him. Officers are on their way, the operator said. I watched the motel room, the minutes ticking by slowly. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of foreboding settling over me. Finally, flashing lights appeared in the distance. Relief washed over me as the police arrived, their cars surrounding the motel. I got out of my car and approached the officers, pointing out the room where the driver had gone. They moved in quickly, guns drawn. Moments later, they emerged with the man in handcuffs. His face was pale, eyes wide with fear. As they led him to the squad car, he glanced at me, and for a second our eyes met. There was no remorse in his gaze, only cold, hard fear. I gave my statement to the police, detailing everything I had seen. As they took my information, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that he had been caught, but also a lingering unease. The image of the young woman lying on the road haunted me, and I knew it was something I would never forget. As I drove away from the motel, the adrenaline slowly faded, replaced by exhaustion. The road was empty and dark, but I felt a sense of closure. I had done what I could, followed through when it mattered. But the darkness of that night, the sense of witnessing something so tragic and horrifying, would stay with me forever. The long, winding road stretched ahead of me, seemingly endless. I had been driving for hours on my solo road trip, and fatigue was beginning to settle into my bones. The hum of my car, an Audi R8, was usually comforting, but tonight it only seemed to amplify my exhaustion. As the night grew darker and the road more desolate, I knew I needed to take a break. I saw a sign for a rest stop a few miles ahead and decided to pull in. The rest stop was almost empty, with just a couple of cars, parked haphazardly under the dim yellow lights. I parked my Audi away from the others, enjoying the brief moment of solitude. The air was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the stuffy interior of my car. I stretched my legs and decided to use the restroom. The building was old, its walls cracked and paint peeling, but it served its purpose. The fluorescent lights inside flickered as I washed my hands, casting unsettling shadows that danced across the dingy tiles. I splashed some water on my face, hoping to shake off the weariness. As I stepped outside, I noticed one of the other cars had left, leaving just one other vehicle, a rusty old van. A man stood by the van, staring at me. His eyes were dark and piercing, and an uneasy feeling settled over me. I quickly made my way back to my Audi, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I locked the doors and took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Just as I was about to start the engine, the man from the van approached my car. He knocked on my window, a forceful, insistent knock that made me jump. I cracked the window just a bit, enough to hear him, but not enough for him to reach in. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Car trouble," he said, his voice rough and gravelly. "Need a jump." I hesitated. The uneasy feeling was stronger now, a primal instinct warning me that something was wrong. "Sorry, I don't have any cables," I lied, hoping he would go away. He stared at me for a moment, his eyes boring into mine. Then he nodded slowly, a strange smile creeping onto his face. "No problem. Thanks anyway." He turned and walked back to his van, but I didn't feel any safer. I watched him in my rearview mirror as he got inside and closed the door. My mind raced with thoughts of what to do next. I couldn't stay here, but I didn't want to drive off without a plan. I decided to wait a few minutes, hoping he would leave first. But as the minutes ticked by, the van remained where it was, and the man never left my sight. The uneasy feeling grew into full-blown anxiety. I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched, that he was waiting for something. I reached for my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Panic began to creep in. I glanced around the rest stop, looking for any other sign of life, but there was none. It was just me, the man in the van, and the oppressive darkness. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I started the engine, the roar of the R8 breaking the silence. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time and saw the man getting out of the van again. This time he was holding something in his hand. I couldn't see what it was, but my instincts screamed at me to leave. I threw the car into gear and sped out of the rest stop, the tires screeching on the pavement. As I pulled back onto the highway, I saw the van's headlights come to life in my mirror. It was following me. My heart pounded as I pushed the R8 to its limits, engine roaring as I sped down the dark highway. The van stayed close behind, its headlights glaring in my mirror. I knew I had to lose him, but the road was straight and empty, offering no cover. After what felt like an eternity, I saw an exit up ahead. I took it without thinking, hoping the winding roads would give me an advantage. The van followed, but I drove like a man possessed, taking sharp turns and speeding through the night. Eventually, I saw the lights of a small town in the distance. I headed straight for it, the van still on my tail. As I entered the town, I spotted a police station. Relief washed over me as I pulled into the parking lot, the van slowing down and finally driving past. I stumbled out of my car and into the station, gasping for breath. The officers listened as I told them what had happened, their faces growing serious. They promised to look into it, but I knew I wouldn't feel safe until I was far away from that rest stop. As I drove away from the town, the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The terror of the night slowly faded, but the memory of those piercing eyes and the man in the van stayed with me. I knew I would never stop at a lonely rest stop again,